Got a spotlight, very exciting. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Matthew Bradley. I'm a senior lecturer in English at the University of Liverpool, and I'm really honoured to be welcoming you to this afternoon session. We're always very happy here to welcome internationally renowned writers to the city, and I have to say that the festival's main sponsors are Student Roost and Bruntwood, and we remain very grateful for their support. I'm kind of the fire drill man, really, but just so you know that way. But also at the end, please wait for the speakers to leave the hall before you do, so they can get downstairs to the Blackwell's Festival bookstore. Claire's going to talk through a couple of things around that near the end. We'll have time at the end of this session for discussion and audience questions, but obviously, if you do have a question, stick your hand up, and then someone will come to you with a mic. So just wait for that. I'm delighted to be introducing, in sort of various different aspects, the Liverpool Literary Agency. The Liverpool Literary Agency was set up in 2020, I think, in response to a report that was done into the challenges that faced working class writers in getting access to publishers and getting access to the literary world. And I remember actually 3 years ago, I think Kit Duval was here talking about working class writing and barriers, and it's always a kind of double-edged story in some ways, because the barriers are very real, very high, and they still exist. But at the same time, there is an awful lot of good work that is going on in relation to those barriers, in trying to change things. And the Liverpool Literary Agency is a big player in that field. The title of this session, I believe, is How to Get a Book Deal, which seems an ambitious kind of thing, really. No, we'll all come out with book deals. It'll be very exciting. But today we have three speakers. They're kind of going to run the session themselves, so I'm not going to do too much introducing. But we have today Clare Coombes, the founder of the Liverpool Literary Agency, also a novelist in her own right, but who has 15 years of professional experience of editing and authorship, including 2 novels, one of which I think is a mystery about a girl who goes missing in Liverpool and her sister's quest to find her. The other historical fiction about 2 people in the Second World War who find each other. One is a member of the Hitler Youth, the other is a half-Jewish girl. But Claire's here really to talk about the work she's doing with the agency, and she has with her David Beckler, who's a very successful author of thrillers. I think the most recent, his very successful series of Antonia Conti mysteries, a journalist who is looking into those kind of areas. And also Steph Sowden, who I think is her first novel, After All You Did, was published this spring, and they're going to talk about that. But I'm going to hand over to Clare, who will run this session. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So thanks to the University of Liverpool and everyone behind the Liverpool Literary Festival. So yeah, I've given myself quite a big task by saying how to get a book deal. But when I break it down and I talk to the authors today and you ask questions, I'm hoping everyone will see how the barriers are, the barriers I used to think are there are kind of not, and there are, definitely things you can do and ways in, and the industry has changed quite a lot and it's more accessible than it ever was. Of course, there's still work to be done. But so before I go into, how we were the first literary agency in the city and how I set up, I'll talk a little bit about my background, because I am a graduate from the University of Liverpool. But I do think that publishing and agenting is a place for anyone, as long as should I be saying that in a university event? But I have done things as well as gain skills from my English degree and my creative writing masters. I've also done a lot of work with writing organisations, like Writing on the Wall. I edited quite a lot of anthologies. They bring through some brilliant writers, and they're based in Toxteth, and I connected with a lot of people, gained a lot of experience. So there are ways you can get into publishing through making sure you connect with writing agencies, because no writer is ever alone. You should always, you might write alone and kind of feel a little bit isolated, but connecting with other readers and critique partners and beta readers is really important. So yeah, we were inspired by the Common People report, which was breaking the glass ceiling in publishing, and I started to see when I was thinking about the agency how people always had the same barriers, whether it was connections. I didn't have any connections in publishing. It wasn't a job mentioned when I was in school or even when I was graduating 18 years ago. And it was always about kind of connections, cost, do you have to move to London? And everyone was reporting sort of having those feelings of low self-esteem through not being quite sure how they were going to connect or compete against people who came from different backgrounds and maybe had more money to take chances and be able to take time off work to write books. So I wanted to tackle that, and I wanted to bring opportunities to Northern writers. And also, I kind of wanted to discover what an agent was. First of all, I was going to be an agent I was going to be an agent's assistant to find people agents, and then the writers I was working with said, just be an agent. But I still had that imposter syndrome of thinking, I've got to be a step before, because I still feel a bit too nervous about being an actual agent, because that just sounds so scary, a literary agent. But when I got into it, I was amazed at how many people in publishing came to me and said either they were secret Northerners or secret Scousers, based down in London, or even that they just understood the challenges and their own stories of getting into publishing. And, you know, things like people used to have to do free internships, and now there's much more of a drive on you are paid for your time. You are not expected to be at somewhere like a big publishing house working for free for 6 months, because I could never have done that. I would never have been able to afford to do that. So that did cut a lot of people off. So I think that there's a lot happening, a lot changing. I'm loving seeing all the quality of writing coming through. David and Steph were two of our first signings, and they've been on a journey with me, and we've probably all learned from each other. And it was one of those moments when both books came in, they were both books that blew me away and made me think, wow, I can really do something with this. You know, these are two very talented writers, and you kind of feel like, don't be intimidated by literary agents, because you are sort of interviewing us as well. You know, you've got to kind of find the agent that's right for you. Yes, it's competitive. Yes, there are a lot of people who submit. But on the other side of it, we are just the same in thinking, can we get you that deal? Are we the right agent for you? Behind the scenes, we're not judging or, you know, kind of going, oh, we're not going to take that work on. There's a lot more that goes into it based on our skills and abilities as well. So David's really suited me because it was an action-packed political thriller, and Antonio Conte was this brilliant sort of character who was finding justice for the underdog, which I was kind of thinking that's very much us as an agency at that stage. And it just had so much in it about, you know, societal corruption, corporate corruption. Actually, since David's wrote it, the government have actually put into practice some of the things that was in his dystopian themes. So you're not allowed to write too many more books on this theme. But it was just really kind of spoke to me, and obviously it spoke to the Amazon imprint, Thomas and Mercer as well, who are a huge publisher. And it's not linked to Amazon self-publishing, although that is a great route for some writers. It's his own publishing house and imprint. And probably a lot of you have heard of a writer called M.W. Craven, an award-winning author in crime and thrillers. And he called David's first book a terrific high-octane crime thriller with a frighteningly plausible plot. And the frighteningly plausible bit is the government in action. So we kind of worked together on it. We did some edits. That's the thing. If I get your submission in as a greater place as possible, but I will still be going through editorial and making sure your book is really kind of up there and ready for publishers. You'll go through publishing edits as well. You'll be assigned an editor, but I'll be working with you on initial edits. Then I'll be researching publishers and commissioning editors. I am always stalking people on Twitter. I am always reading the bookseller, going, who likes this genre? Should I set up a meeting with them? Stay in regular contact with people. That's my job, to create those connections. Because as an agent, I am a negotiator, editor, friend, marketeer, bit of a counsellor at some points maybe. And they are the same back to me. And also, most importantly, that connection between an author and the publishing industry. So I will always provide information on who I'm pitching to and why, any feedback that comes through to help you as a writer, and then I will be negotiating your deals and terms and being very transparent about it, letting you know exactly what publishers have said. There doesn't need to be any mystery. You know, I want to, and loads of agents are like this, we want to make the process as transparent as possible. And then, yeah, it's about me kind of getting you out there. And that's what we did with David, and he got the 3-book deal. So Steph's book was another stunning submission that came in after everything you did. And that was signed with a 2-book deal with Canelo, who are a leading independent. And I just found it like this amazingly addictive thriller. And there might be some questions today about the American setting, because it was so authentic that one commissioning editor just thought Steph was American, and she's from Manchester. So that's the thing about people. You can write whatever you want if you research it. Don't feel like you have to stay completely in what you know. You can go out there and kind of look at different settings and just make sure you research. But, you know, she did it convincingly. It explores identity, nature versus nurture, and it's perfect for fans of Girl A. I know that Abigail Dean's book was kind of, you know, it's still up there in the charts, and we were using it as a bit of a comparable title at the time as well, because publishers are big on that, comparable titles. What do you know from the last few years that you can link your book to? And also, how do you stand out? It's, you know, kind of that oxymoron of publishing is, why are you the same, but why are you different? But I help with that. And Mel Sharratt, who is an international best-selling author of crime novels, she sold over 1.8 million copies of one of her books, and she said it was an incredible debut, a story with characters that really got under my skin, told with compassion and intrigue. I was outraged, fascinated, and heartbroken at the same time. And then the same process I described with David, we went out and pitched to publishers, and nothing, I know Steph and David will back me up on this, nothing is quick in publishing. You know, when you read about these like overnight preempts and book signs, six-figure deal and things, it's not really, like, publishing is a lot more slow moving. So when the book's out and it's all being promoted, it's like, oh wow, but things can take a few months to actually connect with the right person at the right time in a publishing house. Same as agenting, you might take a while to find the right agent. So I'm going to invite David and Steph to tell us about their publishing journey with some questions for them, and then you all, it's quite blind lights, but I will be able to see if people put their hand up to ask questions and ask us anything you want. You'll probably regret me saying that. But we are really open about what's happened with the publishing journeys, the successes, and also the things that we didn't expect. So I didn't expect as an agent to feel so kind of nervous about rejection. If you think you're nervous about approaching an agent, we're like, oh, we've just put somebody else on commission, submission. I really hope that this lands with a publisher. And agents get rejected a lot as well. So we are kind of like just in the same boat. So I'll ask David first then. Tell us a little bit about the background of your story and how it came to be.
I started writing about 12 years ago, and I wrote another series featuring a crime-fighting firefighter, because that's a job I used to do, not the crime-fighting bit. But so it didn't need a lot of research on my part, being quite lazy. I wrote those, and then while I was writing that, I was involved in running my business, and I was coming across quite a bit of what we'd call hidden corruption, where people were doing favours for each other. There were backroom deals happening, which cut people out. And I thought, I want to write about corruption and how it's becoming more and more pervasive. So I ended up creating this character, Antonia, and I just put her in serious jeopardy and see what she did. And I've ended up with actually enough material for 4 books, 3 of which are being published by Amazon, and I'm hoping they'll take the 4th. But that's the background to starting it off.
So, sorry.
Go on. No, go on.
So mine is, I also have been writing for probably about 10 years or so, relatively seriously, after I left uni. I was always like the kid with stories in her head, just, writing, which I'm sure most writers are, like ever since a child, always thinking of stories. And I think for me, writing is very the same as reading. It's escapism. So everything I've written has always been kind of something that was just to entertain me. And then I decided to take it seriously and ended up submitting to Clare. But this particular book, it's set in America in the 1960s, and we go up to the 80s, so it's the mid-20th century, which was just a setting I was really interested in. I studied it a lot at uni. I did a history degree, and I did a lot of I did my dissertation set at that time, so I was just very interested in it. And the story it sort of came a couple of ideas I had for books that when I put them together, it became its own beast. But the first one, which actually will show how much things change in edits, is it's not even a theme that's a particularly prevalent one. But I was interested in the idea of FBI profiling, and when it came about and how it's now a bit of a maybe junk science, and how you look at all the victims and you go, oh, it's this person who drives this car and lives with his mum or whatever. And so what I wanted to do was have a series of victims that the FBI would be sure would be someone else, and it's actually something completely different. So what I developed was this character, Rita, who has been murdering basically her peers. So they're all, young college girls who are the same age as her and look like her. And then once I developed her, she sort of just became a person in her own right and told me not to worry about the FBI profiling. And it was her story. And once, we came up with her background and I came up with her motive, it just became its own thing. And so it was a few ideas that kind of came together.
Yeah, it's kind of like I love both the characters, even though there's a lot of darkness behind the characters, which is great, and then there's a lot of things that happen that you go, oh. But I became so invested in both the characters through the first reading that what you've created there is just like fantastic in terms of characterization. So it's kind of answered the next question about what attracted you to the genre, really. So I'm going to ask instead, who are you inspired by? Who are your authors, your go-to authors that have kind of been who you've gained skills from, I suppose, from reading over the years? So David.
I suppose the author I identify most with is a guy called James Lee Burke, who is an American crime writer who got a 3-book deal with a major publisher when he was 23, and he thought he'd made it. After the 3rd book didn't do too well, it took him 10 years to get his next book published, 120 rejections, and when it was finally published, it was published by his own university. He was a teacher of creative writing. It won the Pulitzer Prize. So I admire his writing, but I also admire his perseverance and his determination to just keep going, which you will need if you want to become an author. Other authors I like is Robertson Davies. He's a Canadian writer. He doesn't write crime. Most of my reading now is crime, but he just writes brilliant characters, and his prose is fabulous. And he also has good stories, which you don't always get with literary fiction. And obviously people like Dashiell Hammett, who wrote in the sort of 40s and 50s, and you've probably seen most of his films. But yeah, those are the authors that inspired me, and I aspire to write as well as they do. I'm not there by quite a long way, but just keep trying to improve all the time.
I think my 2 favourite writers who, if they've got something out, I will throw my money at the hardback and be the person pre-ordering it, is Stephen King and Tana French. who both are prolific, have had so much success and loads of, especially Stephen King, he writes in kind of such varying genres, which I think is so good. And I think what I look for in sort of other writers is the skills that I don't think come naturally to me. So I'm not a plotter, and I always think that maybe my plotting and the actual story beats is not where I come into my own. So I try to consume as much of that from people who I think are really strong plotters. So I love Anthony Horowitz, he's also really good. Stuart Turnton, who writes kind of mysteries with a little bit of I suppose speculative is the word, but there's always a little bit of an edge that's a bit different that I love. And then also I love Susanna Clarke, who wrote Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell in Piranesi, which is nothing that I've ever written, but I would love her imagination. And if I could create a world like she does, I'd be very happy one day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at plotters and people who, because I very much have to plot if I'm writing, but I do meet a lot of writers who can kind of let that happen as they're writing. So I think it's quite fascinating to hear about the processes. But I'm going to move on to questions a little bit about the publishing process, which we've kind of touched on a little bit, looking at other writers' journeys. So, David, what surprised you most about the publishing process?
How unprofessional the whole thing appears to be. There's just a lot of people in publishing who don't seem to be that switched on. And one of the things that I found quite shocking was that when you submit your work to agents or publishers, they just don't reply. You just hear nothing. And I'm not expecting, a critique of what I've sent them, just telling me what's wrong and how I can improve it. All I want to know is, yes, I've received it, thank you very much, but we're not going ahead. Which I would expect in any other. I've run businesses dealing with lots of big companies, and they always respond. If you write to them, if you send them a proposal, they will always respond. But in publishing, it's just, if you don't hear within 6 months, forget it. So I thought that was a bit of a shock when I first came across that.
Yeah, I do have an answer to that from the agent side. We were trying to give answers to people, and then we realised it was so overwhelming. So what we did instead was we've set up an auto reply that explains what an agent does day to day. So we will say, exactly what we do with our current clients, exactly what the world of agenting is, and then we will give tips about if we don't hear from us within 12 weeks, here might be the reasons why, or maybe it's just that we're not the right fit. But when you see how we outline our everyday life, it kind of gives you a little bit more of that. I think bigger agencies and people who've got interns and assistants and things, yes, I would expect them to reply. But if you're smaller and starting out, we kind of had to balance our time. Yeah.
It wasn't a dig at you.
I know.
No,
it's a question that really needs answering though, and I'm glad that it's come up. Because when publishers don't always reply to me, a lot do. You build the relationships, they come back and say yes or no. But sometimes I'm chasing something, thinking, just tell me. Because very much agents work on commission, but I will also tell people where to go that I think are good. Not where to go. That sounds like I tell you where to go. Organisations that I think help writers the most, and ones I've got experience of. So. Places like Jericho Writers or I Am in Print or the Literary Consultancy. There are places that I say, maybe things I wish someone had told me, because I went to an agent far too early. It was an agent of a well-known script writer now, and he got me in, and it was an agent in New York, and I didn't follow any of the processes, and I just wasn't ready, and I wasted that chance. But because I knew him, they gave me some feedback, and I was like, I could have been, so many stages ahead before I tried this. So I feel like if I give people that also reply, explaining what we need to see and a little bit about us and where to go for information, I think that sort of settles it if you're a smaller agency. But it is a very good point, so I am glad you've said. And I do get frustrated with the publishers not responding. But yeah, Steph, what has surprised you?
I think my main surprise was how hard it actually is to work to a deadline. I think a lot of writers do. I still work full time. And so, you have so much time. When you're just writing as a hobby, you can spend as much time as you want on it. And I always thought, I'll be fine working to deadlines because I'm really good at being like, I'll get up early and get in a few hours before work or whatever. But actually being creative on a deadline is a much more difficult beast. And you sort of forget that when there's no deadline and, you get overwhelmed at work, you're stressed about this project, or you get busy, or you have plans like in your social life, that if you take 2 weeks off, it's fine, doesn't matter, you'll come back to it and it'll be ready when it's ready. As soon as you've got a sort of 6-month deadline, or, on some kind of editing round, you get a month. Sometimes, I think I had 1 3-week deadline for one of the later rounds of edits for my first book. And so if you do have a busy week at work and suddenly you don't have any brain energy, and you don't have any creative ideas, you get very far back and then you find yourself always catching up, and it can burn you out. So I was really surprised at how difficult I found deadlines. But then the happy side of it is I've been really surprised at how many people I've met, and having a group of writers and having people, so I'm in a WhatsApp group with a few other writers who are all at similar stages in our career, 1 book out, 2 books out, a debu's coming out soon. And it's just nice to have people who understand, when you're complaining about edits, or, you've got a question about what's your agent say about this marketing thing. It's just nice to be able to farm it out, because most people in your other life don't know about it.
I know it's so hard to explain to people who don't. I'm so glad that you're both in strong writing networks and that you're able to talk about that, because I feel like it's having a necessary support group. Because people go, when's your book out? As soon as you sign with an agent, they're like, oh, you must have got a book deal. Doesn't always work out. We will try really hard. I research everyone. I go out to the big 5 and leading independents, but sometimes it's just not the right time for the book. It's not the right place for the book. Other things are out there that are similar. So it kind of might not even be the case that you definitely get a book deal once you sign with an agent, and that surprised me as an agent. I thought, I'll sign people. Publishers will just take these books. No, they didn't. They took a lot of them, but there are ones that I'm always like, oh, I wish I managed to land that, but it doesn't always happen. So the last question to you both before we open it up is tips you would give to find an agent and get published?
I always find giving advice a bit weird, because I still feel like it's a bit of a fluke that I'm up here myself. But I think, in a very cliche way, I suppose, don't give up, just obviously keep writing. Claire has just mentioned it, but the value of having other people read your work. For however, 8 years, never anyone read my work. It was just something for me. And then when I decided to take it more seriously, I signed up to a Curtis Brown Creative course. There's quite a few courses out there, and there's also writing groups and things, but it was the first time I'd ever had anyone read my work. And also, I think another really good thing about it is it's sort of access to raw writing. I found the only access I have to writers is through published novels, which have gone through however many rounds of edits. So I didn't know what level was my first draft at compared to other people's first drafts. And so just seeing what other people are producing and then talking about it together and working out, what they've said is a really good point. Actually, I've noticed in theirs that maybe if it drags a bit there, maybe I'm doing that as well. So it's really scary, and it took me 8 years to actually have people read my work, but it is really invaluable.
Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions now. That, as I say, the light's shining on me a bit, so if people have got their hands up, I can see you've got your hand up, but if I miss anyone, there are people going around with the microphones. So yes.
How essential is it for an aspiring writer to have a social media presence?
I'll answer it first. I don't think it matters. Being very honest, it matters for non-fiction, because I have tried to pitch out non-fiction, and commissioning editors or publishers will tell me about how many followers have they got on Instagram, how prolific are they. I'd say that the connections you make on Twitter within the publishing industry are very useful for you as a writer. So a lot of my writers have found each other through social media before they've even been signed. There are groups who've got together. I think it's a good way of connecting and sharing work and also keeping up to date. But I don't mind how many followers you've got. You know, you could just be on there for information. I'm not going to go and check how many people are following you.
Yeah, I think, especially things like Twitter, if you've got 5,000 or 50,000 followers, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference to your book sales. What will make a difference is if you're a celebrity with huge following. But generally, social media it's a bit of a distraction, and you can end up focusing too much on your social media and not enough on your writing. And if you've got a good publisher, they'll promote your work. They'll be out there selling your books. You shouldn't have to be spending all your time trying to. You will do. I mean, even if you end up with one of the big publishers, you will have to do some promotion of your own. But I don't think social media is a fabulous sort of medium for selling books.
Yeah, I agree. I only joined Twitter once I'd signed with Clare, and I think I'd also signed with my publishers because I felt like I had to. And I had a personal Instagram that was just for sending my friends pictures of my dog, which I've now turned into a bit more of a bookstagram thing. And I have found I've quite enjoyed sharing like what I've been reading and stuff. But on Twitter, I've met some nice, like some good friends, but I've not been on it. I deleted it from my phone a few months ago because you can really get swept up into like a void of it, and suddenly all you're seeing is people who are instant bestsellers, or you're seeing a lot of people with like sad stories. It just feels like it can be quite draining. So I don't think it's essential for getting a deal. But obviously, if you happen to have 8 million followers, then I'm sure it'll do very well.
I just wondered if the writers had any formal training, sort of creative writing or anything like that, and if that is something that the literary agency is that more likely to catch your eye if a submitting writer has that background?
Sorry, formal training. Oh, sorry. Formal training. No, I think that I think I prefer it when writers have joined writing groups, but that doesn't mean they should have, paid money for it. I think that some courses are brilliant, and there are bursaries available to help writers now. There are competitions. I think that just making sure you're working with other writers so that you're sharing each other's work, and you're not just the worst people you can send your work to sometimes are just your family or your friends, because I said that early on, and my sister was like, "Oh, you write like Margaret Atwood," and that wasn't a compliment for her because she was sick of Margaret Atwood at A level, and I didn't write like Margaret Atwood, so I was never that good, suited to being an agent. But I just would never look. I'll look and see have people done competitions, have people connected, are they part of a writing group, do they have an awareness of their genre. But I'm not concerned if you've got a degree. I'm not concerned if you've done particular formal training. But I do expect you to have shared your work with other writers.
The only thing I would say is I, for ages, never did any formal training. I feel like a lot of what I actually learned about writing was just through reading. So when I then did a course, which I did in 2020, and I started in February 2020, so then lockdown came in and I had a lot of time to do it. I actually found that the lessons themselves weren't massively helpful. They're very interesting, beginning, middle and end and all that. But actually what was more valuable was that the tutor was an author and you got 2 tutorials and then this community of writers that I met, which in hindsight probably, if you joined a writing group, you probably could have done that as well. But I just didn't know where to find any of these things and had researched courses, and so I just took the plunge and did it. But it was more the community and speaking to other authors and things that was more important than actually learning, the craft.
Yeah, I'd reflect that. I've had no formal training. I just wrote. I used to read a huge amount. I still try and read a huge amount, but obviously you spend time writing, which takes away from your reading time. But I joined a writing group, and that accelerated my development as an author. obviously I've read lots of books on writing, some more helpful than others, but working with other authors, reading their stuff and critiquing it has helped me hugely, and vice versa, you know, letting them read my stuff and telling me where I'm falling down, because you can never see where you've gone wrong. That's why you need an editor. And working with other people and editing other people's work has been the most helpful thing I've found to improve my writing.
There's two in the middle, so I'm not sure. Go one and then.
Hiya. So just a question for the authors. Before you signed on to the literary agency, how did you manage your time in writing your novels when you were serious about writing them, alongside work and sort of social lives? Did you have like dedicated time when you were writing?
I suppose it depends on your own schedule. I'm a morning person and I'm useless after about 3 p.m. So I get up early and get in a couple of hours before work. And that's just the way I do it. And also it's nice to have a couple of hours in the morning before anyone else is awake in the house, and it feels nice and peaceful. But then the flip side of, you know, doing it in the mornings is if you're tired or you've been out the night before or whatever, it goes by the wayside. And then also, you know, weekends and stuff. But sometimes I get to the point where like I am just having to have the weekend off because I'm knackered from everything. And then sometimes if you're in the flow of it and in the rhythm, it's nice to have a weekend where I've cleared it, not seeing anybody, and I'm just going to sit down with the book and write and, you know, just get words on the page. So it's a hard one to answer because it depends on your schedule. Because I know people who, as soon as work finishes at 6 o'clock, and then they will write until midnight. Or I've got a writing friend who she posts on Instagram at like 2 a.m, like, just finished my edits. And I'm like, how are you working at 2 a.m? So I suppose, yeah, it sort of depends if you're a night owl or a morning person.
Yeah, what I tend to do, I've still got a day job, but I work for myself, so what I tried to do was structure it so that I had chunks of time off, so I could spend several days at a time writing. But what you've got to do, I think, really, is just get into the habit of writing. And once you've been doing it for a few weeks, then it becomes a habit, and then you just carry on doing it. Obviously, when you've got a bit more time, I mean, you were talking before about the energy you require. When you're being creative, if you're knackered, you can sit and edit, or you can sit and just read through your work and just spot mistakes. But to be creative takes a lot of energy. So you've got to have the energy to do it, but you can't just wait until the mood takes you. You've got to force yourself to actually sit down and write. Just get in the chair, and if you're just staring at the page for a couple of hours, then you'll write, because you don't want to stare at a blank page, you know. And whether you think it's rubbish or not, I mean, the number of times I've written something and I just thought, oh my God, what's this? And then the next day I come back to it and I think, well, that's quite good. And other times I think, hey, this is fantastic. I've written loads of good stuff. And I come back to it and I think, this is going straight in the bin, you know. So
I was going to say the same. The best piece of writing advice I ever heard was give yourself permission to write badly. And then once you've done that, you're like, oh, great, I'll just sit down and write nonsense.
yeah, just do it, you know. And whatever time you can fit in, just fit it in as much as you can. And it will become a habit, and it will become not necessarily easier, but it'll become more consistent.
Yeah, so my 6-year-old, I know that question, thinks I'm a daydreamer, because I think you need walking away time and time to think. So I'll actually be thinking about people's books and edits for them, and I'll probably just be staring into space, and she's like, oh, mummy is a daydreamer. Because I do think you need the walking around time and the space away from the actual writing as well, so you can be creative. So we had a question at the front as well.
Thanks, guys, that's great. So I've actually just finished my first novel about 6 months ago, and it's aimed at the young adult market. Now, from my research and from the feedback that I've had, I feel, in my opinion, that it's quite an underrepresented market. And I just wanted to ask, in your guys' opinion, who would be the best publisher to look at taking that forward?
I think what I used to, because I don't represent young adults because it's such a specialised market, but actually my associate agent Laura does, because she's found that a phrase called new adults as well, you know, the one that sort of crosses over a little bit, that confuses everybody, including publishers. The ones when you get kind of a bit older, because young adult just has this whole range, this whole age range. What I used to do when I was looking for agents, and even now when I'm looking for writers, the books that you think are most similar to yours, check on the acknowledgements page and see who the agent is. And even if you see some names and you're like, oh, I don't know who the agent is, Google the names that are in the acknowledgements, or go to the author's website and see who they're represented by. And you will then find the agents and the publishers. And the confusing thing is that every publisher's got quite a lot of imprints. So you might not realise it's HarperCollins because it might say something else in the back. But when you start doing your research, you go, oh. And then when you Google it, you will find stories about how that book was acquired. Now, there's a magazine called The Bookseller, and I think you can get a couple of free articles a month. And there's another place called The Publishing Post, and that's free. And that'll give you some information about, you know, if you search for young adults, and it'll tell you a little bit about the latest signings, and you'll get an idea about how you need to pitch it. And I would recommend looking at places like I Am in Print and Jericho Writers, because they do agent one-to-ones, and they do specific young adult ones as well. And it's either paid or bursaries.
Yeah, the artist yearbook is a good book to get as well, because it will list all the agents in the country and what they're interested in. And once you've identified an agent, have a look on their website, because some of them will be saying, I'm particularly looking for this, this and this. And obviously if you think your stuff fits in, then it could be a perfect fit. But make sure you research every agent before you approach them. And like Claire was saying earlier, she approached an agent when she wasn't ready. Make sure you only get one chance to make your first impression. So don't send your stuff until you're 100% ready. Okay, and I mean, I've done it loads of times, just sending stuff off thinking, it's ready, I can't wait to get it out there. But make sure it is completely ready, and have it as well polished as you can get it.
I think we've got time for, we've got one more. I'm just trying to look at the timing. What are we okay for? Yeah, so we'll have a few more questions then, yeah. So who was next? We put their hand up. I think oh, there we are, you've got a microphone. You win.
Hi. I've published my first novel on Amazon, and along with millions of other people, so obviously sales are slow, but I have had 7 5-star reviews, which have made me think there might be something in it. So what do I do next? What's my next move?
I mean, agents and publishers will accept self-published books. We've got one out with Picador, who did Shuggy Bain, massive publisher, and they are taking on Ashley Nugent's book, and they've done some editing work on it, but it was self-published. And it's just that when it went out on submission to them, they took it back off Amazon. But I'd say when you're going out on submission, you can leave it on Amazon. No one's going to, you can actually say that you are a self-published writer. But again, I would do the whole process of looking into your market that we were just talking about, and what your categories are in terms of what your genre is, and making sure you look up the right agents and publishers. But it's not going to go against you for being self-published. And sometimes publishers now are going around and looking to see people who are reviewed on Amazon, and deals are being made in that way.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yes, it's definitely changed. The old sort of prejudice against self-publishing is disappearing from most decent publishers. They're aware that it is such a difficult job to get published that a lot of authors decide they don't want to keep banging their head against a brick wall, and they'll publish it themselves. But that can then show them how good your stuff is.
So keep applying to the established publishers, you're saying?
Sorry?
So you're saying keep applying to the established publishers?
Yeah, keep applying to the
Yeah.
publishers. Obviously, mostly there'll be agented ones that you need to get in through an agent, or if there is open submission to the publishers, just make sure it's fully researched, so you're going to the right people.
So how do I get an agent?
Research who's representing your particular genre and area. Go on Twitter and look up different agents, the Writers and Artists Handbook.
Yeah, I've tried that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Google. All I do is stalk publishing houses and commissioning editors. So I expect authors to stalk agents. So just do as much work as you can on Googling the people who, and as I said before, look at your books that your book would be next to in Amazon's categories or on the bookshelf, and find out who represents them.
Right, so it's essential to get an agent first before going to the publishers?
Not always, but in a lot of cases, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and quite a few publishers do take it without an agent, but they tend to be the smaller ones or the newer ones, and even they are sort of moving away from that because they get so many submissions. So they use people like Clare and who are there really to filter the writing, so they don't have to do it themselves. And a lot of the big publishers, I wouldn't have got the contract I did without an agent, because a lot of the big publishers just won't look at you unless you've got an agent. So you can approach some publishers directly. So again, have a look at which ones will take unagented submissions. And sometimes some of the big ones will take somebody, they'll have a window maybe for a month where you can submit directly, and then at the end of that window, then it's back to working with agents. But I mean, getting an agent is probably the best way of landing a big
get
publisher.
An agent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Who did we have? I think in the... Oh, sorry.
That's all right, thank you. I was just wondering, because presumably you do not have very much time when you're looking at submissions. When submissions arrive, roughly how much time do you spend looking through one? And also, do you approach it with a particular method in terms of what you're looking for, or is it very much you're looking for something that has, sparkle, or something that is unique?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the spark. So I will go to everyone with the same, unless someone hasn't followed the guidelines. We've got guidelines quite clearly on the page, telling us, telling people what we want to see. And if someone says to me, like, I don't want to send you my first 3 chapters because my 6th chapter is the best in the book, and like, you've not followed the guidelines, I'm not going to read it. I've got too many submissions. And also, if it's the best in the book, why isn't it first? Because the publisher's gonna feel the same. And what I do is I'll see, how much you know about sort of, if you've done a great elevator pitch, describing your book in a line or two, if you've done a great blurb. So I recommend going and looking at the back of the books of ones in your genre and getting ideas for your own and putting that into your submission letter. And then I want to see that you've taken writing seriously because you've joined writing groups, and that you know the market, so you know what you'll be next to on the bookshelf. Then I will read the first 3 chapters, and sometimes I just don't feel like I'm right for it. Sometimes it'll be a case of, can I do this justice? No. But I try not to read the synopsis, because if I request the full manuscript, I want to read it like an editor, but also like a reader, and be surprised. But, I do get some through, and they're like, you definitely want me because I'm going to be amazing, and I get a bit put off with it. And I want people to be confident, but I don't want anyone being a bit sort of like, how dare you turn me down sort of behaviour. So it's best just to know your market and be confident in how you're talking about your book, because that's the main thing that's going to draw me in. And I will read historical fiction, romance, thrillers, crime. My range is up on the website, but so broad. And then we've got Laura, who does fantasy and a bit of YA and sci-fi and stuff. So yeah, just and also don't threaten me. I think I have said this, and not that you would. I have had some threats, just like sort of random ones, like can't believe you're not responding. You know, who do you think you are, sort of thing. I was just not going to work. This is it. You know, so I think if anyone gets a little bit threatening, then you're not going to get an agent. Yeah, different. Sorry. We are going to be downstairs if anyone wants to ask anything.
Thank you. Can I just say I've really enjoyed this? I get a sense of an agency that isn't quite as formulaic, where you don't... I mean, I left school a very long time ago and just got loads of jobs, and I always liked writing and did bits and pieces, and then I finally went to university. But it just... When you were talking about your favourite authors, I was just trying to remember who my favourite author was. And I couldn't remember the surname. And when I looked it up, it was Marge Piercy. My favourite ever book was Women on the Edge of Time, and it says a feminist dystopian novel. Now, I would not have had any understanding what that meant when I first got involved in writing, and I think you can be very easily put off by a lot of these things, and I just get a sense that you're a bit more open-minded and realise people have very different paths to writing that are equally valuable, but a lot of agencies would sort of think, well, if you don't know what feminist dystopian fiction is, you certainly can't have anything to do with writing for my agency.
Do you know, I'm in a group of agents. We're in a committee for equality, diversity and inclusion, and there's a lot more of us out there who aren't like the typical old school, just write and we're going to ignore you. The group I'm in and a lot of agents who mentor me, because they're not doing it for any reason. We're not cutthroat with each other. So I think there's a lot more agents now who are sympathetic and do understand. Because I'm the same as you. I didn't know what I was reading. I loved reading growing up, but I didn't know how to categorise it or anything like that, or what it was. So I think a lot more agents are sympathetic.
In my day, there weren't a lot of children's books, so whatever books my dad had, I remember reading all the Father Brown books when I was about 8, probably. So, I mean, I just absorbed stuff without actually knowing what I was absorbing. And I do think you give a sense of there is a much more flexible way of writing. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. We do have books on sale for Steph at Blackwell's and signing as well. And David is doing a signing book. He's asking for donations towards is it KUK?
KUK Northwest. They work with refugees and homeless people in sort of Warrington and that area. So the books won't be on sale, but I'll just ask you to make a donation to that charity. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and it's just falls to me to say thanks so much to Claire, David and Steph for a brilliant session that, demystification seems like it's one of the biggest boundaries for people getting into writing, and it's really lovely to hear some actual practical advice for what people are really doing. So yeah, if you just, they will be downstairs, and if we can just thank them once more for a brilliant session. Thank you, Claire, David and Steph.